Today, I got quite a few things I kind of want to talk about. Similar to the video I made, I want to say that's like 2 weeks ago. I'm just putting it all into one video instead of making like 42 separate videos. I'm going to just put it all into one video. And I think like the main thing I really want to talk about is trades. Because, as you guys know or don't know, the NFL trade deadline is indeed tomorrow, Tuesday, October 30th at 4 p.m. Eastern time, I believe. So, 3 p.m. Central time. So, I know a lot of people want the Texans to make a trade. And I'd probably include myself in that group. I think if the Texans really want to be contenders, if they really want to do something this season, then I think they need to make a trade. Because I do think the Texans have the core pieces still intact to make a run. But they definitely need some outside help. Especially now that Will Fuller is out for the season. So I do think it'd be wise to go get a player, maybe two. But I think two was kind of stretching it. So if we do see a trade made by the Texans, it'll only be for one player. And even then, getting a single player off of a trade is a definite stretch because the Texans never make trades at the deadline. I mean, yes, he had the Dwayne Brown situation last year, but that was different. We were trading away a player rather than us getting a player in return. Now, obviously, we're not going to get a star player. We'll probably get a serviceable player if we do make a trade. But, again, it's difficult seeing this actually happen because, again, it's not just what the Texans need. It's what the other team needs as well and what they want. And then if they're willing to trade the player. That's why I really don't like talking about trades much. Because you really don't know how a certain team values a certain player or how that certain team values certain picks. So, I really hate talking about trades, but the hot topic right now seems to be Desean Jackson. The Texans need to trade for Desean Jackson. That's what everybody's saying at the moment, and myself included. The moment that Will Fuller got hurt, it was still unknown whether he'd be out for the season or what the injury was. So I tweeted out, if Will Fuller is out for the season, you call Tampa and ask for Desean Jackson. Now, why does Desean Jackson come up? Well, I want to say it was about last week. Desean Jackson made it known that he wanted out of Tampa Bay because, apparently there's some he doesn't like Jameis Winston pretty much. But that kind of sort of changes now. If, Jameis Winston wouldn't have gotten benched for Ryan Fitzpatrick last week, then maybe, just maybe, there was a big chance that we could make a trade for Desean Jackson. Now, I don't know if Ryan Fitzpatrick is going to stay the starting quarterback for the Buccaneers. If he does, then Desean Jackson probably stays in Tampa. If Jameis Winston gets named the starter, then, he wants out, most likely, because he just doesn't like Jameis Winston. I mean, who likes a guy that eats W's? Yeah, anyways. So, what sucks about that is the Bucs won't announce a starter till probably later in the week, so it's going to make it difficult to trade for Desean Jackson. Now, as far as Desean Jackson himself goes, he's 31 years old. Not exactly young. Actually, not young at all, but again, he's still a deep threat wide receiver, which is something we really need now that Will Fuller is out for the season. So everybody that's saying Dez Bryant, Jordy Nelson, Golden Tate, Mohamed Sanu, those guys aren't deep threats. Those guys do not fit what we need. And if we were to trade for a wide receiver like, say, a Jordy Nelson or a Golden Tate, then, I think it'd be smarter to just pick up Dez Bryant because you don't have to give up draft picks for it. I think what's important here, it's not that the Texans need a wide receiver. it's that the Texans need a deep threat wide receiver. You can't just get any wide receiver and plug him in and that's it. No, we need someone that stretches the field, like Will Fuller. And Desean Jackson is one of the only players that's probably available that can do that. So, in 2018, Desean Jackson, he makes 11 mil. So that's 11 mil against the cap. We have the cap space for that. And in 2019, he makes 10 mil. So if we chose to keep him, that count 10 mil against the cap. But the good thing about that is Desean Jackson isn't guaranteed anything for 2019. So pretty much, after the 2018 season, you can just go ahead and cut Desean Jackson and you don't owe him a single penny. So there's definitely a way out. If you don't want to keep him, if you want to keep him, of course you could keep him for 10 mil. But if you don't want him on your team after the season, you could just cut him and, nothing happens. You're good to go. But now the question is, what would it take to bring in Desean Jackson? Like a draft pick, a player. A lot of people seem to ask, do we have the assets to, make a trade? And I say, hell yeah, we do. We have 2 second-round picks. We have pretty much every single pick in the draft. I think we might be missing a 5th rounder, but I could be mistaken. But, yeah, now I'm not saying trade a second-round pick for him. Trading a second-round pick for Desean Jackson would be moronic. The most I would personally go, a 4th-round pick. Maybe a 4th-round pick and like a 7th, maybe a 6th. But I would not go anything higher than a 4th-round pick because Desean Jackson is 31. His contract is pretty good, but still, he's a 31-year-old player. He wants out of your team. He doesn't want to be there. So, he can most likely get away with a 4th unless, some other team comes out of nowhere, like the Eagles or, I don't know, the Eagles again, and, try to get him, because apparently the Eagles are interested in him as well. Well, I'm not saying the Texans are interested in him. I'm just saying that it would be wise for the Texans to show some interest in him. Now, corners. People want a corner. Well, guys, we're not getting a corner. I'm sorry. I know the popular name right now is Patrick Peterson. And yes, I know Patrick Peterson did come out and say he wanted to be traded. What was it, like 2 weeks ago? But then the Cardinals management said, we're not trading Patrick Peterson. And then a few days after that, Patrick Peterson came out and said, you know what, I don't want to be traded. So, Patrick Peterson isn't an available player, so please stop saying Texans need to get Pat Pete, the Texans should get Pat Pete, because Pat Pete to Houston, Pat Pete to anywhere is not happening. He's staying in Arizona, and, that's it. Now, as far as other trades, I don't really think there's anyone else out there really for the Texans. I mean, maybe you could say Desean Conley, the corner from the Raiders. He was 24th overall pick in 2017 out of Ohio State. He's 23 years old. You have him through 2020. You could pick up the 5th-year option. But I don't know how much the Raiders would want for him. I'm assuming since they got a 1st-round pick out of Amari Cooper, which was dumb, by the way, they probably want a 1st-round pick for Desean Conley as well, which in my opinion is not worth it. And you do have to remember he did get charged with sexual assault. So, yeah, the Texans, they don't sign players like that. So, Desean Conley is out of the picture. I don't know about Jack Rabbit. A lot of people say he gets burnt a lot now. Personally, I haven't watched him play at all this season besides the game he played against us. So I really don't know. So I'd rather, if people are saying he's getting burnt a lot, then I'd rather not even bother with that, because why would we need that? So anyways, that's all there is to, I guess, my trade talk for right now. Unless, something happens, I'll probably come back with another video tomorrow or whenever, if the Texans make a trade. But let's talk about the next thing, man. Injuries. Seems like every year, the Texans, for some reason, just cannot stay healthy. And going into Denver, this is probably the least healthy will be all season. I mean, J. Joe's not going to be playing. Zach Cunningham's not going to be playing. Aaron Coleman's not going to be playing. Will Fuller's not going to be playing. So, these injuries are really kind of taking a toll on us. As far as what we'll do to, manage, J. Joe, I see him coming back against the Redskins in Week 11. I think we low-key got caught a break there because J. Joe's probably only gonna miss one game. Aaron Colvin will probably most likely get him back against Washington as well. So when we come back from the bye week, the secondary will be significantly healthier. Zach Cunningham, I also expect him to be there for the Redskins game. Now Will Fuller's obviously out for the season. So that injuries are really taking a toll on the Texans right now. And of course, you already had Dylan Cole probably out for the season. You had Kevin Johnson, Kayvon Webster. These injuries are really kind of starting to pile up. But besides the Will Fuller injury, the Dylan Cole injury, I do think we'll be alright because the bye week came at a right time. After the bye week, I expect Deontay Foreman to be back. I expect Zach Cunningham, Jonathan Joseph, Aaron Colvin all to be back. So, we should be good. The safety group is really stepping up for us and playing positions that they don't usually play for us. For example, Jamerson. And they've even started using Tyrann Mathieu as a nickel corner, Kareem Jackson as an outside corner. So these safeties have really saved us pretty much these last few weeks. Hopefully, that's it for injuries. I don't really want any more injuries piling up because, things can get ugly. Now let's talk about something else. Last thing I want to talk about in this video. We have a problem with the offensive line. And I know people, when you hear we have a problem with the offensive line, you start to panic. But for once, this is a good problem with the offensive line. Okay, I know 26 sacks on the season isn't good. But what if I told you this stat? Look, these past 4 weeks against Dallas, Buffalo, Jacksonville, and Miami, the Texans' offensive line has only allowed 8 sacks. Now, I know that still sounds outrageous. Okay, but what if I told you 6 of those 8 sacks came against Buffalo? So, that means the Texans allowed 1 sack versus Dallas, 0 sacks against Miami, and then 1 sack against the Jaguars, a very talented defensive front. Now, the fact that the Texans only allowed 1 sack against 2 very talented fronts like the Cowboys and like the Jaguars is pretty telling, meaning this offensive line is starting to get it together. They're starting to gel. Besides that one game against the Bills in between it that really kind of ruined everything, the offensive line has been playing better as of late, and I think it's time to start giving them credit for it. I mean, if you guys watched the Miami game, DeAndre Hopkins, I want to say Deshaun Watson handed the offensive lineman the ball, Nick Martin and Greg Manx, I believe, and let them spike it because, this is a really tight-knit locker room, and the players know all the criticism the O-line is getting, and the players also know that the offensive line has been playing better as of late, so they want to involve the offensive line. Now, that's not really what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about is we have a problem on the offensive line. And me and my best bud, Rising Phoenix / Duck, we're talking about this on Twitter. Greg Manx, the right guard at the moment because, what's his name? Zach Fulton got hurt. He's been playing really good. And saying he's playing really good is an understatement. Greg Manx in the past, he was never this good. He was a decent center and a very bad guard. But this time around, Greg Manx, he's doing a good job in pass protection. And one knock on Greg Manx in the past has always been he can't run block. Well, guess what? These past 2 weeks, the Texans have been running right in between Greg Max and Nick Martin with a lot of success. Now, Zach Fulton was your big name offensive line free agency signing. I'm not saying he's a problem. I still think he's a good player. I still think he's our best offensive lineman, pass blocking wise. But when you add in Greg Max, it adds a running game. So it brings up the question. Now you have Greg Max, these past 2 weeks, we've been able to run the ball efficiently. And not even, decently. We've been running the ball really, really good. So, what do the Texans do? Do they throw Greg Max back on the bench and start Zach Fulton and risk throwing away what you've worked on these past 2 weeks? Or do you stick with Greg Max, leave Zach Fulton on the bench? Or, you could leave Greg Max at right guard and then transition Zach Fulton to left guard. And a lot of people are probably going to ask, well, Zach Fulton's a right guard though, right? No. Zach Fulton in KC, he played left guard, center, and right guard. He literally had to play all over the place. So it doesn't really matter. Well, at least I think it doesn't matter where Zach Fulton plays. Preferably, if it were up to me, and I love Sunil Kilamedi, I think he's the one that has to ride the bench, honestly. I'm not saying it because he's a bad player. I think he's a fine player. He'd be a good 6th offensive lineman for us, a great 6th offensive lineman for us. But I just think the way Greg Max is playing at the moment, you cannot bench him, and you can't have Zach Fulton on the bench either. So all of a sudden, we got Nick Martin, who's been playing really well these past, I'd say 3 weeks. After playing a pretty terrible game in Dallas, you have Greg Max looking like a legitimate starting offensive lineman for once, and you have Zach Fulton, your best pass protector. So, it's a good problem to have, but I just don't know if the Texans will get it right. I hope they do the right thing, and I think the right thing would be Zach Fulton left guard, Nick Martin center, Greg Max right guard. I think our interior offensive line would be really dominant. But I don't see this Texans team doing it, man. I could see the Texans doing 2 things. Either Greg Max straight up goes back to the bench, or Zach Fulton goes to right guard, and Sunil Kilamedi goes to the bench, while Greg Max takes over at left guard, which is something I don't want, because at right guard, Greg Max looks really good, and I'm pretty sure you guys have heard of this, but it matters. What side you play on the offensive line, it matters. You guys saw it firsthand with Julian Davenport. Looks actually serviceable at left tackle, right tackle. He looked god awful, and many offensive linemen have came out and said that it makes a huge difference. I want the Texans to get this right. I just don't think they will. If they do, then I'd honestly say our interior offensive line would be fixed for the foreseeable future, and all that would be left is either draft offensive tackles or hope that Kendall Lamb and Julian Davenport continue progressing, because I think it's worth noting that they have been playing better, and maybe they end up being good players for us at the left and right tackle spot. So who knows? But anyways, this is all I have for you guys today. I know it's still a pretty long video, almost 20 minutes. So if you're watching to the end, I appreciate it. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you guys later. Peace.